Well, I work with a number of funds and high net worth individuals, and over the past few years, they've been not that keen on it. But this year, I'm seeing a lot more interesting uh, people coming to me and going, what's going on, what to buy, where do you put the money, that sort of thing. So it's the flow of funds is really starting to come into the sector.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics, and on a very special day because silver, not just $20, but Brent, I'm going to pull it up and show you. I know Brent Cook, who's over there on the left side. I'll bet you he checked the silver price at some point today, and we see even on the Kitco chart, above $21. It's still climbing throughout the day. And at least as someone who has spent far too much time in the past decade looking at Kitco charts, hitting the refresh button, certainly seems like something has changed, and we can dig into that and the stocks today with Brent Cook of Exploration Insights. Brent, great to have you on here today. Nice to finally catch up with you again. And how's everything been going with you?
Oh, it's been great. Market's looking good. I think you're right. Today is kind of an important day for gold and silver.
Yeah.
It's getting noticed all of a sudden. It's looking quite well. So all these years of pain are starting to pay off. It looks good.
It sure does. You see the gold price even churning higher, 1842, which, Brent, if my math is correct, or even close, means we're about $80 away from the all-time high. And I would suggest that given what that represents, we're not talking about, a company that had great earnings, but world's reserve currency, even as mispriced as it may be, now finally, at least we're recognizing gold more than we ever have before. So I'd love to hear any thoughts on this gold and silver rally.
Well, I work with a number of funds and high net worth individuals, and over the past few years, they've been not that keen on it. But this year, I'm seeing a lot more interesting uh, people coming to me and going, what's going on, what to buy, where do you put the money, that sort of thing. So it's the flow of funds is really starting to come into the sector. And I think given what we're seeing on a global basis in terms of the various feds pumping trillions of dollars out of nowhere, I don't see the downside, or not much downside. So it looks pretty good. And you're right now, trying to put a pig through a garden hose? That's kind of where it's going. And I'm looking at valuations of companies that are just, to be honest, outlandish and silly, but they continue to go up. So yeah, we're seeing more money coming in right now than can possibly be absorbed.
Yeah, I think that's the key. And I appreciate you mentioned that because, just because more people decide they want something someday doesn't necessarily mean it became more valuable, but it is a marketplace. So there's the supply and demand, a lot of factors to balance. Although I'd be curious to get your opinion on this because I've felt like, especially in the last 3 to 4 weeks, we saw money going into gold and then the gold stocks and starting in silver. I mean, the ETF and SLV and COMEX numbers are just mind-boggling. But it feels to me that there's even been a new wave of money into the equities, the financings for the silver companies, which is often one of the last parts to get rolling. Have you been seeing that same thing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a good friend of mine that runs about $1 billion out of Michigan, and he's a generalist. I play volleyball with him.
Yeah.
And about a month ago, he came to me saying, "You know a lot about gold, don't you?" And
A little bit.
since then, he's invested $40 million into various some gold stocks and the ETFs. He's big, the bigger companies, larger market cap companies, but still. And, he's double his money already. He's happy as can be. And we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, because it feels like takes a while to reverse something once you really get momentum behind it. So, I mean, even last year, it's funny, we were up at the Sprott conference, which I know you will be speaking at this coming week, and we'll touch on that in a bit. But we had a similar rally last year, yet it felt like you didn't have those guys jumping in yet. You didn't have institutional money jumping in yet, where it's like now you have that, but even mainstream money coming in too.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this long enough that I'm always a little nervous of sticking my head up because I get hit by a 2x4 in the back.
Yeah, yeah.
It feels pretty good right now.
Yeah, it does feel different. And I have some fun questions for you today, sir.
Cool.
Fortunately, Brent has put up with my silver fetish before, so he knew what he was walking into today. Although number one mentioned gold getting close to the all-time high, not far off from $2,000. And it seems like Uncle Jerome and his gangsters at the Fed are basically going to guarantee that we get there. So, maybe I'll start a poll on this one. What do you think the price of silver will be when gold crosses $2,000?
Oh, geez. I will say that at PDAC in Toronto last year, the last conference anyone got to go to, or this year I should say, we always have a dinner party with a bunch of analysts and mining company execs and that. Everybody picks the gold price for the year. Normally I'm looking, past few years I've been looking for it to be down. This year my price target was 1935 by this coming PDAC. Yeah. So I'm sticking with 1935 for gold. If we see 2000 gold, I would not be surprised to see, I don't know what, $35 silver.
Yeah.
I know that's a lot lower than you're thinking, but
well, I think that there's still a bunch of people watching today that $35 silver, and I'll be pretty excited about that. Curious, how does this feel as compared to 2011?
It's different dynamics because we've had the whole global economy go bust with COVID, yeah. And so there is so much money now being pumped into the system that it really leaves gold as the only real monetary instrument that is not going to be devalued with all the the money coming in. I mean, the inflation rate of gold is about 1.5% to 2%, meaning production. Mm-hmm. Whereas I don't know what it is with the dollar right now, but it's massive. So that is the different dynamic right now, is that we've got a fundamental change happening in the global currencies that is not going to revert for a long, long time, if ever. So that's the fundamental change that I'm seeing, and it's real. It's not like it's going to go away. It's not a trend. It's legitimate, and it's it's frightening for some people.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, and it's a great point because that's really what, I don't know, it was 11 years ago, and maybe it was early, but allowed me to feel comfortable even after getting clobbered in 2011 and 2012, because the Fed can't raise interest rates. All this debt that's out there, for the same reason the housing bubble collapsed, for the same reason the dot-com bubble collapsed, it's almost like you have a free, we all know about the Greenspan put. Now we're getting like a different kind of put under the metals. So I know a question that's on a lot of people's mind right now. They've seen, especially in gold now, the last couple of days in silver, it happens quickly. The stocks have rallied. And like you said before, on one hand, some of the valuations are getting a little bigger, yet what do you do where it's like, if you think still, whether it's this year or next year, the metals are going to go higher, how do you handle that?
Well, I've been thinking about that a lot. Joe and I have been talking about that with regards to what goes into the newsletter. And as I see it, there's two ways to play this. One is don't think, just look.
Yep.
Someone puts out a good drill hole, you buy it. Don't worry about the context, the details, etc. If Eric Sprott buys a stock, you buy the stock. If it's got silver in its name, you buy it. That's one way to do it. And I think
my Achilles.
so. I think that's one way, an individual retail player can do it, assuming they're not betting too much in an illiquid stock.
Yep.
And that's fine. And then there's the leverage plays where you've got companies with deposits that are, they got a lot of ounces, but they're worthless. They're marginal at best. That's not what Joe and I are doing, because when we put something in the newsletter, we really have to have a good feel for what is really there. The ultimate economics of the deposit, or the chances of it becoming a deposit, or the chances of a discovery. So we go real into detail into the geology, the metallurgy, what might happen down the road, what the capex may be, what the issues are going to be, and lay all that out. Because in honesty, I and Joe as well, we're both economic geologists and have worked all over the world for everybody almost. It's really, I don't want an embarrassing stock in my portfolio. I hate that. So I'm willing to miss out on the Eric Sprott play, or the 10 million ounces at 0.6 grams. I'll miss out on that, because it's an embarrassment I don't want, given we're so, we're scientifically focused and economically focused. So that's the two ways to play it. You can go real, or you can go with the trend.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because along those lines, something I was thinking about, love to get your view on. You could make the case that for people, depending on their risk of speculation or degree of speculation, that let's say you had to move to $35 or $50 silver, probably the marginal producer that maybe it cost him $19 an ounce to get it out of the ground, so he only has $1 margin, probably a lot more risk on the upside. But could you make a case that in that type of spiked price Hunt Brothers environment, that actually a marginal producer, and again, that's going to be everyone's preference, but would you expect those to go up more in that scenario?
Probably yes. I mean, if we're talking that big of a price move, certainly. My experience has been that on the whole, these marginal and uneconomic resources are generally that way for a reason. To be the metallurgy is a problem, the capex is a problem, location is a problem. You can't build it, you can't recover it. The geology is not right, the strip ratio is too high, you get too much dilution. All those issues are there regardless of the price, right? Yep. So I don't know, half of these marginal deposits are always going to be marginal no matter what. But if I tried to start building a mine right now on some low grade deposit in, I don't know, call it Alaska, I've still got 5 years down the road before I even put the first shovel in. Wow. And so up to that point, it's not that important if that's your thesis, that things are going to the moon. Right. So yeah, marginal deposits are a good play if that's how you want to do it. We're not that big on marginal plays.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and good to just know all the risk of the different things that are out there. So perhaps along those lines, let's say folks are expecting a big move in the silver price. If you want to look at any particular name, or if you just want to answer it in terms of, let's say you expected $35 silver, is there a particular type of project or stock or stage that you would want to look for? Any tips that folks might want to consider there?
I think your best bet in that scenario is a big silver producer like Pan American Silver. I mean, that's where the funds are going to go. The big funds in New York and such, they're going to go to the big producers. There's Alexco. There's a number of silver producers out there. We own Pan American, have for quite a while. What else is there?
Well, there's First Majestic,
First
Silvercrest,
Majestics, yeah,
Ag.
exactly. Those will do well. We own another one called Evrim Resources, which is a prospect
Mhm.
generator. They've got a royalty on one of First Majestic's silver properties.
Yeah.
So that's another way to play it is via the royalties. Um, that's the ones that come to mind. I'd have to pull up a sheet, but there's Hecla and Coeur and etc.
Yep. And it's nice. There's a silver stock, I guess, depending on whatever investors are looking for. That's what I think is nice about investing world we have now, where you can find, it's like there's a different tool for each purpose or perspective. And I also appreciate what you mentioned though about, because I've been thinking about it for a while. You came on last year, I believe it was, and I asked you about, how the different price in silver or gold affects things. But you had an interesting point that maybe you could touch on again, where usually people who know how to run a project successfully at the current price, that usually is the even more important than, yes, there are places where project can get bailed out, but usually comes back to who's running the show.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a big difference between running an exploration program and making a discovery and actually building a mine. It's a completely different mindset of people. So if you're a company that makes a discovery and you drill out a resource, it makes a lot of sense to kind of back away and bring in the mine builders and the engineers, because that transition rarely is smooth, and you get a lot of issues with uh, resource calculations, metallurgy, dilution. Dilution's a big one. Where,
Yep.
for instance, a company will put out a drill intersection of, call it 1 meter of 25 grams gold. That sounds great, eh? But you're going to have to mine at least a meter or 2 meters more of waste. So you're diluting that 1 meter, 25 grams by double, by 2 times. So your real grade is, call it something like 8 grams.
Right.
Big difference. And people need to take that into mind when they see drill results, for sure. Is that's a good intersection, but what is the actual grade going to be to the mine or the mill?
Yep. Which I
And the
appreciate.
boring stuff, boring details, but
But it's the stuff that makes a difference, and that you and Joe Mazumdar point out in Exploration Insights, which we will touch on in 1 second. Although, a final question I had for you: I know you've looked at Bluestone Resources, who we had Jack Lundeen on the show a couple of weeks ago, and any thoughts that you could have there from your research?
Sure. I was there about 2.5, 3 years ago and came away very impressed. I mean, I've worked in Guatemala and Central America a long time, and I knew the area. I know the issues that Pan American
Mm-hmm.
and Tahoe have had with Escobal. So I was expecting to see similar sorts of issues. However, they're in a completely different place, part of the country. It's all cattle ranching. There's very few, if any, indigenous people. There's very few environmental issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, Joe went down last year and looked at it as well. And he came back very positive, and we actually added it to the portfolio. I think it's one of the better high-grade economic deposits there, and I think it will get permitted.
Yeah, it seemed like an interesting project they had there. And perhaps for folks who would like some guidance in navigating all these things that are going on, the stocks that you cover, I have Exploration Insight, your site pulled up here, and perhaps you could tell folks what they get there. And especially more important, if you can put in perspective where it's like, all right, there's a lot of newsletters, but when you really get this stuff right, and if we're correct that we're facing a big rally in gold and silver. So if you can touch on that, Brent.
Sure. Well, the newsletter was started by me back in 2008. And then Joe Mazumdar came on, I think in 2015 or 16. And over time, it's become his letter. He sort of bought me out. I'm an economic geologist. I've worked in over 70 countries lived in 4, done everything from grassroots exploration, generative work, all through to bankable feasibility studies. Joe has a similar track record, although he's been a mining analyst for a couple of companies as well. He was the metals analyst for Phelps Dodge. He was corporate development for Newmont. So he's got a lot of experience as well. And he's married to an Argentinian geologist. They live in Vancouver now. She runs the back office and corrects all his spelling mistakes.
Yep.
And so that's what you get. And our focus is on, our exit strategy is not selling to the greater fool. We're trying to sell to someone smarter than us, that being a major mining company. Yep. So that's why we look at, all the details of a project's geology, economics, all those issues. That's why we do it. So we try to focus on what is real and legitimate, and projects all over the world. And you can sign up for a month. If you don't like it, you can quit. You have access to everything we've ever written, bought, sold, etc.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. We'll have the link in the description below. And Brent, I like that strategy where you let the young guy come out and do it, because I know you're about to go play some beach volleyball. And there's Joe. He looks a little cold in some of these pictures. So again, you see brilliant businessman as well as economic geologist. And also, before we wrap up, I know you are speaking, I believe it's Friday at the Sprott show. If you could tell folks what you'll be talking about there. I know a lot of people watching are going to be attending.
Yeah, there's a panel discussion of some sort with questions from the audience at 8 o'clock on Friday morning that I'm moderating. We got Randy Smallwood, we've got Lobo Tigre, and cool. I forget
had him on the show.
The third guy that's going to be there. But there's going to be 3 of us fielding questions, live questions from an audience. So definitely tune into that. We've also got Joe presenting at the show, but that's going to be, you can access, I think he goes on Thursday, but that's accessible all through the show, so you don't need to be there for that. And again, go to our website. There's lots of free information and commentary there as well. Exploration insights.
Well, I would certainly recommend that. And Brent, thank you as always. It's been great getting to know you over the years, learning from you. It's such you can't download mining knowledge acquired from 30 or 40 years overnight. So I appreciate you as a resource through these now becoming fun and interesting times. We'll look forward to catching up with you at Sprott. And folks, if you're wondering why there's so much excitement going on, especially with silver crossing $21 this morning, well, that video is coming your way now.